housekeeper was waiting for them by the front door. She was an old woman and wore a black dress and white apron. She lived at Canterville Chase and looked after the house. "Welcome to Canterville Chase," said Mrs. Umney. "Would you like some tea?" "Yes, please," said Mrs. Otis. The Otis family followed Mrs. Umney into the library. There was a big table in the centre of the room and many chairs. Mrs. Umney put teacups on the table, then she brought a pot of tea. The Otises sat in the library and drank their tea. They looked out of a large window at the rain. The rain was falling heavily and the sky was black. They heard thunder and they saw lightning. Mrs. Otis looked around the room. There were many books on bookshelves. There were paintings on the walls. There was also a red stain on the floor.
"I must have the princess for my wife." "But Aladdin," his mother began. "No buts, mother. I love the princess, and I want to marry her. Go to the Sultan and ask for me." "Me? Go to the Sultan's palace? Oh, no, no, no," Aladdin's mother said. "Listen, my son. The daughters of a sultan do not marry poor boys from the city. But we are not poor now, mother, and we can give the sultan something for his daughter. Wait." Aladdin went away and got the fruit from the magic garden under the ground. Now, of course, he knew it was not fruit, but white, red, green, and yellow jewels. "Take these jewels, mother, on a gold plate," he said, "and give them to the Sultan." So the next day, Aladdin's mother carried a gold plate with many beautiful jewels on it to the Sultan's palace. She went into a long room, but when she saw the Sultan, his vizier, and all his slaves, she was very afraid. So she waited quietly in the room and spoke to nobody. In the evening, she went back home again with the jewels. Aladdin was very angry with her. "Mother, you must speak to the Sultan," he said. "I have no father to do this for me. You must help me. I must marry the princess. I love her." So the next day, and for many days after that, Aladdin's mother went to the palace, but she was always afraid to speak. In the end, the Sultan saw her and asked his vizier, "Who is that woman? Why does she come to the palace every day?" The vizier spoke to Aladdin's mother. "Do you want to speak to the Sultan? Yes? Come with me." The vizier took Aladdin's mother to the Sultan, and she put her head on the ground at his feet. "Get up, woman. Why do you come here every day?" the Sultan asked. "Speak, woman." "Your Majesty," Aladdin's mother said quietly, "I have a son, a good young man. He is called Aladdin. He loves your daughter, Princess Badour al-Budur. He cannot sleep or eat because of her. He wants to marry her." The Sultan laughed. "What? Marry my daughter? Your son? Your Majesty, these jewels are for you, from my son, Aladdin. And Aladdin's mother put the gold plate with the jewels in front of the Sultan's feet. Everybody looked at the jewels, and the long room was suddenly very quiet. Then the Sultan spoke. "These are very beautiful jewels," he said. "No man in Arabia has jewels more wonderful than these. Your son is a rich man, a good husband for my daughter." The vizier did not like to hear this, because he wanted the princess to marry his son. "Your Majesty," he said quietly in the Sultan's ear, "my son is a rich man too. Give him 3 months, and he can find better jewels than these." "Very well," said the Sultan, and to Aladdin's mother he said, "Your son must wait for 3 months, and then perhaps he can marry my daughter." Aladdin's mother went home to tell Aladdin, and the vizier went away to speak to his son. And every day, for 2 months, the vizier's son came to the Sultan and gave him gold and jewels and many beautiful things. For 2 months, Aladdin waited happily. But one day, his mother came home from the market and said, "Oh, Aladdin, Aladdin, the princess is going to marry the vizier's son. I heard it in the market. Everybody's talking about it." When Aladdin heard this, he was very unhappy. "What can I do?" he thought. He put his head in his hands and thought for a long time. And when night came, he took out the magic lamp and rubbed it. "Whoosh! What is your wish, master?" said the fairy. Badur al-Budur saw the love in his eyes and smiled. She closed her eyes again. Then the genie carried her back to the Sultan's palace. The next morning, she remembered Aladdin's eyes. "There is no love in the eyes of the vizier's son," she thought. "He thinks only of gold and of jewels." So the princess went to her father. "I do not want to marry the vizier's son," she said. "I want Aladdin for my husband." The Sultan was very surprised. "What can we do?" he said to his vizier. "My daughter wants to marry this man Aladdin. He is a rich man, it is true. But who is he?" "Ask him," said the vizier quickly, "for more of those beautiful jewels on 40 gold plates and 40 slave girls with 40 slaves. Nobody is that rich." "Very good," smiled the Sultan, and said to his slaves, "Bring Aladdin's mother to me." When Aladdin's mother arrived, the Sultan said, "So, your son wants to marry my daughter. But first he must give me 40 gold plates with jewels, 40 slave girls with 40 slaves must carry the plates to me. Then my daughter can be his wife. Aladdin's mother went home and told her son, and Aladdin smiled. This was easy for the genie of the lamp, of course, and the next day, when Aladdin went to the palace, everybody in the city came out to watch. First came 40 slave girls in dresses of gold, and every girl carried a gold plate with wonderful jewels on it. After them walked 40 slaves in coats of gold, and last came Aladdin on a beautiful white horse. "What do you say now?" the Sultan said quietly to the vizier when he saw all these wonderful things. "Aladdin must marry my daughter. How can I say no?" And the Sultan went to Aladdin and took his hands. "My son," he said, "you can marry my daughter tonight." "Tomorrow, Your Majesty," said Aladdin, "because before I marry your daughter, she must have a palace, the most beautiful palace in Arabia." The genie of the lamp worked all night, and the next morning the Sultan saw from his window a beautiful new palace with gardens of fruit trees and flowers. "Wonderful," he said. "Black magic," said the vizier quietly. That night Aladdin married Badur al-Budur, and they lived happily in the new palace. Chapter 5. New Lamps for Old. Where was Abanazar all this time? When he could not get the lamp from Aladdin, he went home to Morocco. He was very angry with Aladdin. "But the boy is dead now," he thought, "and perhaps next year I can go back and get the lamp." One day he got out his 7 black stones. These stones were magic, and when he put them in water, the water could tell him many things. Soon he could see the magic lamp in the water, but it was not under the white stone in the Arabian hills. It was in a palace. "How did this happen?" said Abanazar. "I must go back to Arabia and find this palace." After some months, he arrived again in the city in Arabia. Soon he saw the new palace and asked a man in the street, "Who lives there?" "That's Aladdin's palace," was the answer. "Princess Badur al-Budur's husband, a good man and very rich." Abanazar said nothing and walked away. "That lazy, good-for-nothing boy," he thought angrily. "So he has the magic lamp, and he knows about the genie. How can I get the lamp back?" For the next week, Abanazar watched Aladdin's palace. One day, Aladdin and his friends left the palace to go hunting in the hills. Good, Abanazar thought. Now I can get the lamp. After Aladdin left, Princess Badul al-Budur went into the palace gardens. She sat under a tree and looked at the flowers. Then she heard a noise in the street and called her slave girl Fawzia. What's the matter? Who's making that noise? She asked. Fawzia, go and look in the street. When Fawzia, mistress, she said, go and give it to the old man. The princess laughed. Aladdin can have a nice new lamp. Fawzia went out into the street with the lamp. New lamps for old? The old man called. Called, and the children behind him laughed and called, New lamps for old! The old man, it was Abanazar, of course, saw the lamp in Fawzia's hands and knew it at once because of the picture in the water of his magic stones. He took the old lamp, gave a new lamp to Fawzia, and then quickly walked away. He walked out of the city into the hills. Then he took out the lamp and rubbed it. Whoosh! At once, the genie of the lamp came to him. I am here, master, he said. What is your wish? Carry Aladdin's palace, the princess, and me back to Morocco at once, Abanazar said. The Sultan can kill Aladdin for me. To hear is to obey. In a second, Abanazar, the palace, the gardens, and the princess were in Morocco. And in front of the Sultan's palace, there was now only a little red smoke. Chapter 6. There and Back Again. In the evening, Aladdin and his friends finished hunting and began to go home. Suddenly, a friend said, "Aladdin, look! The Sultan's men are coming, with swords in their hands. What do they want?" "I don't know," Aladdin answered. When the Sultan's men arrived, they said, "Aladdin, we must take you to the Sultan. He's very angry." "Why?" asked Aladdin, but the men could not tell him. In his palace, the Sultan took Aladdin to a window. "Where is your palace?" he cried angrily. "And where is my daughter? Answer me!" Aladdin looked out of the window. There was only the ground and the sky. No palace, no gardens, nothing. He closed his eyes, opened them and looked again. And he had no answer for the Sultan. "It's black magic. I always said that," the Vizier said quietly in the Sultan's ear. "Your Majesty," Aladdin put his head at the Sultan's feet. "Kill me now. I do not want to live without Badur al-Budur." There were tears in his eyes. "Find her in 40 days, or you die," the Sultan said. "I hear and obey, Your Majesty," Aladdin answered. But without his magic lamp, what could Aladdin do? He went out from the city and looked for his wife and his palace. But of course, he did not find them. After 37 days, he sat by a river and cried, "Oh, Badur al-Budur, my love, where are you? Where can I look now?" He put his hands into the water of the river, and then he saw the magician's ring on his little finger. He began to Morocco, but Aladdin was there in a second, and there was his palace in front of him. He went into the gardens and looked up at the windows. "Badur al-Budur!" he cried. "Are you there?" In the palace, Badur al-Budur heard him. "Is that Aladdin?" she thought. "But he is far away in Arabia." She went to the window, opened it, and looked out. "Aladdin!" she cried. "Oh, my love!" For the first time in many days, Aladdin smiled. "Come up, quickly," the princess called. "The magician is not here now." Her slave was here again. "You must give him a drink and put the powder in it. When he is asleep, I can kill him. Don't be afraid. I'm going to take you home very soon. Now for some good magic." He began to rub his ring. Whoosh! "What is your wish, master?" said the genie of the ring. "Bring me some sleeping powder," said Aladdin. "To hear is to obey." In a second, the genie was back with some sleeping powder. Then Aladdin and the princess waited for Amanazar. In the evening, they heard him on the stairs. "Don't went quickly into the next room and stood behind the door. Abanazar opened the door of Badur al-Budur's room and came in. He smiled. "You are more beautiful every day, Badur al-Budur," he said. "Your husband, that good-for-nothing Aladdin, is dead now. You must marry me. You can have gold, jewels, palaces, anything. But you must be my wife." For the first time, the princess smiled at Abanazar. "Why not?" she said. "You are a rich man, and I am happy here. Yes. Let's drink to that." And she gave him a tall gold cup with the drink and the powder in it. "Let us drink from one cup, Abanazar," she said, and smiled at him. "You first, then me. In my country, new husbands and wives always do this." "To Badur al-Budur, the most beautiful woman in Morocco," Abanazar said happily, "and my wife." He looked into Badur al-Budur's eyes and began to drink. Very afraid, the princess watched him. But it was a good sleeping powder, and after 5 seconds, Abanazar's eyes were closed, and he was asleep. The princess ran to the door of the next room. "Quick, Aladdin!" she called. Aladdin ran in with his sword and saw the sleeping magician. "Well done, my love," he said. "Now, go into the next room and do not watch." Badur al-Budur ran to the next room and closed the door. Aladdin put his hand in Abanazar's pocket and took out the lamp. He put it carefully into the pocket of his coat and then stood up. The sword did its work quickly, and Abanazar never opened his eyes again. The princess came back into the room and ran to Aladdin. He took her in his arms. "The magician is dead," he said, "and now we can go home." He began to rub the lamp. Whoosh! Fire and red smoke came from the lamp. The princess watched, afraid. "I am here, master," said the genie of the lamp. "What is your wish?" "Carry this palace, Badur al-Budur, and me back to our city in Arabia, but leave that dog Abanazar here." "To hear is to obey," said the genie. When the Sultan looked out of his window and saw Aladdin's palace again, he was a happy man. And when he took his daughter in his arms, he was the happiest man in Arabia. From that day, Aladdin and Badur al-Budur lived happily in their palace. They lived for many years and had many children. But Aladdin always carried the magic lamp with him, day and night.
Oxford Bookworms Stage 2. Published by FLTRP. Copyright Oxford University Press, 2009.
书虫牛津英汉双语读物第2集，《爱丽丝漫游奇境记》Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, retold by Jennifer Bassett. Chapter 1. Down the Rabbit Hole. Alice was beginning to get very bored. She and her sister